This week on London Real, we have movement artist Ido Portal.
So people think it's about handstands and, jumping on the rings and doing flips or whatever, when actually our work is way, way beyond that. It's a completely different and a huge paradigm shift in the way that you think about your practice and your movement and your body. We all have a body and we all move. We have no choice. The only question is how well are you doing it? And most people just don't have the user manual for their own machinery. Changing your dogma takes guts. I don't believe in planning. I believe in reacting. I'm not a messiah. I'm a thinker. I'm a teacher. I'm a mover. I'm being Ido. I'm just trying to handle myself in that way and be genuine.
London Real presents Ido Portal. Just move.
Walk beside me. Don't walk behind me.
If you've never been to London in the summer, in like a heat wave scenario like we're having right now, it's pretty much madness. If you've ever been to Rio de Janeiro in the summer and got a feel for what it's like when the people are coming out, they're doing capoeira on the streets, well, it's kind of the same thing happening right now here in Britain. It's usually a reserved culture, but when it gets warm like this, man, it's all crazy. So I'm going to walk you down here by St. Paul's Cathedral, which is a beautiful monument that made it through the bombing during World War II. And I'm going to take you down Millennium Bridge and walk over the Thames. I thought it would be best to get you outside and show you a bit of this lovely city when I introduce you to a very unique guy. And his name is Ido Portal. And I heard a lot about Ido because the thing that travels before Ido is the cult of Ido. And we spoke about this a bit in the show. There are so many videos and interviews of Ido online that this idea of Ido kind of hits you before you meet the man himself. And some of his most viral videos are some of the movement that he's doing, some of the things that he perfected growing up in Haifa, Israel. And we see this man that has these incredible bodyweight maneuvers, kind of dance-type moves that definitely are capoeira inspired. But it's more than that. It's the way he speaks and it's the ethos that really draw people to him. And there's so many people that I've had on the show here that talk about movement and fitness, but no one really commands the type of respect and adulation that Ido does. And I was really curious to find out why. And I'm a bit of a skeptic. I get to meet lots of people for a living and I get to see who's the real deal and who isn't. So I never knew who's going to show up in the studio. And Ido rolls up dressed in black and carrying what seemed like his earthly possessions on his back. And he was about to go for a 2-day seminar here in the UK, and then he was going to go to Spain, and then he was going to go to the next country. And I don't think he had any plans of stopping. And it reminded me of Caine in the series Kung Fu, traveling from village to village. And I asked Ido about a book or about any type of a multimedia way of spreading his message, and he just doesn't have any interest in that. And I think that speaks volumes about Ido and who the man he is. He told me that he sees a book that he would write as a static snapshot of the way he would have thought in the past. And there's a very poignant phrase that he says during the show, and he says, "Don't walk behind me, walk with me." And I think that Ido knows that you need more than a book for him to communicate the way that he feels about movement. And he says when people come to his 2-day seminars, he says sometimes they cry or get really emotional because he says it's not really about the muscle ups on the rings, it's not really about the handstands, it's not really about the animal crawls. It's more about I think maybe getting in touch with our physical selves, something in this day and age, especially with the internet and the way that we can serve up visual images like this and audio, that maybe we tend to forget that we're effectively animals. and we have this innate sense of motion and our bodies, things that we can really tune out to really quick. And I've been guilty of that in the past, where I've kind of tuned out to what my body's telling me. So, you know, Ido reminds us of that. And he's also just a fascinating guy to listen to. He just has a lot of interesting things. He's not afraid to call out vegans and CrossFitters and tell people what he thinks. And you're going to hear all of that on this show. And I was really quite moved by Ido. And you know, when I get to actually spend time with people, I just get the feeling that, you know, he really wants to spread his message in the most organic way possible and the most genuine way possible. And so anything we can do to facilitate that, I feel good about. So I hope you're watching this video, and if it moves you, please share it with your friends and let people get to meet this fantastic man. I feel really bad that I missed his seminar here in the UK, and I would love to start doing more movement myself. And I'm actually now kind of obsessed with my own bar muscle up this year, so that I'm doing a lot of body weight training myself, and I'm really enjoying it. You know, sometimes you can kind of forget why you're training. You can forget why you're lifting weights, and it's nice to get back to the basics and find out how to move and why we really just all need to move. So there's a bit of my thoughts on Ido, and you know, what a kind of incredible guy he is. So I hope you enjoy the video. Like I said, share it with your peeps, you know, if you're feeling him. We are walking out on the Millennium Bridge, yes, built at the Millennium, and you can see part of London's beautiful skyline behind me. You've got the Shard of Glass, the big tall one, and you've got the Tower Bridge there back in the distance, and behind me you've got the Tate Modern Museum, and just what a fabulously beautiful day in London. Oh, you got to check this out. We actually have a beach here in London that you would never know about. Check out these homies down there. They think it's a beach. So, you know, more power to them. That's great. You can actually go down there and pick up old ceramic pipes from like the 1800s, and my aunt comes to town and does that all the time. So, yeah, you got to get to the city when the summer's on. I just wanted to give a shout out to our new partners, and those are the guys at Monkey Nutrition. These guys have a new way of looking at supplements for athletes, and it's something that I'm training 5-6 days a week these days, and I do think you need supplements that are the best of their kinds and delivered in an intelligent way. And you know, gone are the old days where we would buy a gallon of protein powder and try to dose ourselves with all of this garbage protein. Now is the day when you got to think a bit more, and you got to put what's in your body that's intelligent and the stuff that can absorb in your system the best. And that's where these guys come in. You know, they're a startup, and they're really dedicated to basically a whole ethos of eating clean and getting the proper nutrition in you and just doing it smart. And they're all about learning. They're all about interacting with the community. So I'm big fans of them. Please go check them out. You can click on the link here, go to monkeynutrition.com. I've started to have their Primal 26 whey protein isolate, which I quite like. The vanilla is my favorite flavor, and I'm popping that probably 3 times a week after my pull-up workouts and dips and kind of my upper body I've been doing for my my Muscle Up 2014, which I will post on video when that happens. So big shout out to those guys. Check them out. They're in the USA as well. So I'm just kind of taking in this this summer day. We only get about 10 of them here in London, where you actually need AC. So I'm kind of drinking it in, and it's interesting. Another one of my guests this week was Steve Maxwell, and he's one of the personal trainers of Joe Rogan, the first guy to teach kettlebells in the United States. He's 61 years old, and he was actually staying right over here by the Tate Modern this week, and so he's coming up. Fascinating to hear a guy who was hanging out with the Gracie family, as in Hickson, Hoyce, Hoyler, and Horian, back in '89, before the UFC. You know, he was one of the first Americans to receive a black belt from Helson Gracie, and he's kind of been there and done that. You know, black belt in jiu-jitsu himself, big into training and the intelligent way to train in all sorts of ways. So we've got him coming up, and we've also got Peter Joseph, who formed the Zeitgeist movement back in 2007. I spent a couple hours with Peter. It was a real honor to finally speak with him. You know, he's one of those guys that I saw on Joe Rogan in 2012, and you know, it kept us inspired and kept us going here at London Real, to just know that guys were out there like that with such a message. So you know, I guess we're really killing it these days, aren't we? We're just being really fortunate and really grateful to have such cool people coming on the show, and yeah, I have the fun part where I get to talk to him. So, so there you go. I just wanted to give a final shout out to our long-term partners in crime, the guys that provide my coffee every morning, and that's the folks at Bulletproof. Yes, they are a kind of a biohacking company that looks at what you put in your body and making sure it's the best stuff. And they have a coffee that's free of molds and toxins. And I combine it with some grass-fed butter and some brain octane oil, which is like the best of the MCT oil. And it's how I start my day. I love these guys. Big fans of what they do. Dave Asprey is the man. He's got a fantastic podcast that you can check out. He interviewed me on it, but they've got fantastic guests, including Arianna Huffington, Tim Ferriss. Man, I could go on and on. They've got like 130 shows. They do 2 a week and just cranking out awesome content. And you can go to bulletproofexec.com. They got free information on their blogs, sleep hacking tips. Don't get me started. So, you know, what can I say? I'm rolling with all sorts of strong people like Ido Portal and Monkey Nutrition and Bulletproof and Steve Maxwell. So it's all good here. And there you go. If you want to send me a message, please do. It's Brian at LondonReal.tv. You know, it looks like we got tons of guests, but you know, I'm always looking for more. So if you know someone coming through and want to contact them for me, I would totally appreciate it. Yeah, best thing you can do for us is tweet this out, Facebook to your friends, subscribe here on YouTube, leave a comment, because you know this movement's really all viral, and that's all there is to it, man. Either people love it or they don't. So now I'm going to leave you on a stunningly sunny day here in London. I feel like I work for the tourism board. Definitely come check it a visit. And now I'm going to leave you with a fantastic man. Sit back and relax, or maybe get down into a squat and listen to Mr. Ido Portal.
Let's do it.
All right, let's do this. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Mr. Ido Portal, who is a movement artist and teacher from Haifa, Israel, who grew up studying martial arts and at the age of 15 began studying capoeira, which, if you're not familiar with capoeira, it's an Afro-Brazilian martial art dance. It's kind of hard to describe exactly what it is. When I saw some of your videos on YouTube, I recognized it kind of immediately. I was in Rio de Janeiro about 10 years ago, and I was next to a McDonald's outside of Ipanema, and a capoeira movement broke out in front of me, and there were like 7-year-old kids and 50-year-old grandmas, and they were doing backflips on the concrete in front of me, and someone was playing music, and I've never seen anything like this. And I think if there was ever an expression of movement for just the sake of movement, that was probably it. I'd never really seen anything like that before. So I'll ask you more about capoeira. But after capoeira, you studied gymnastics, yoga, dance, circus arts, martial arts, in your pursuit of what you call a movement culture, which I believe represents a paradigm shift in physicality. I think you're trying to move us away from things like fitness, which you see as a culprit, and I think you're trying to move us away from the separation that we have between health, aesthetics, performance art, as in I might see a runner or a bodybuilder or a fighter or a dancer, but I think you're trying to tell us they're all movement people. So you have a worldwide following. You're here in the UK to teach this weekend for 2 days. You've got countless videos on YouTube showing your movement and describing your philosophy, which I think is as important as your movement. Maybe your philosophy is more important than your movement. Ido, welcome to London Real.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
That was quite a long-winded introduction, right? You're probably wondering when I was going to stop. You know, I was thinking back to that capoeira moment today. I was down in Rio to train some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I just remember that happening in front of me, and I don't even think I understood what they were doing, because it wasn't really a performance, it wasn't a workout, it wasn't a fight, it was just these people kind of being happy and moving, and I don't know, I just remember that. I was wondering, what struck you about capoeira when you were 15 that kind of made you go that way?
Probably what struck me was the fancy stuff and not what it really is, which is first and foremost a social interaction.
Right.
Movement, corporal dialogue, movement conversation. It's a tactical game. It can take on a full-on fight moments, and it can be also like more showy or take on different expressions. But it always happens in a context of a culture, society happening around it. And what got me into it is not what got me to stay there. It's two different things, but it was the movement. the movement that got me in there, the fancy movement first, and then I stayed because of not the fancy movements and the more intricate, the more interesting, the cultural aspect.
Okay. You're from Haifa, Israel. I was wondering if you could tell us, what is Israel like? What is Israel not like? A lot of us know Israel because you guys are in the news all the time. And I was watching you in your studio. I'm from San Diego, California, and everyone thinks, San Diego must be the greatest place. Why would you ever leave there? And, you know, and I always used to say, I think San Diego is a little boring. I get bored with beaches. But I was wondering, what is Haifa like? What is it like growing up in Israel? Tell me.
Well, Israel is very different from, I think, from the outside point of view. The media kind of, taking certain aspects and enhancing, not always in a way that correlates with actual statistical occurrences or happening. One of my favorite authors, Nassim Taleb, he wrote not so long ago about we should have a news channel that reports according to statistics, and then like diabetes, for example, the amount of people dying from diabetes each day is much more than any terror attack. But you hear about the spicy stuff, you hear about the conflicts. So Israel suffers definitely that kind of a reality. I grew up in a beach town, Mediterranean weather, or around similar to San Diego, 300 days of sun. It was a great place. And it was also peppered with a more complex reality of terror attacks in the 90s and the Gulf War, 91. I was still a kid, and remember that, gas masks, rooms.
Right. Because Saddam was threatening to attack Israel, so that made everything much more intense.
Yeah, and that kind of sits in the background, and but the daily life is very Western.
Okay.
We speak English pretty well. We grow up with Americanized TV, Americanized food, so very familiar. Probably the biggest difference is what we call tachlis, a very kind of down-to-earth, super practical thing that always sits in the background, and no bullshit kind of an approach, because of reality and because of the necessity of such an approach. So people don't walk around the bush, people call it as it is. It can be a bit rough on the edges, but also extremely warm and extremely real.
Is that because it's inherently a dangerous place? Is that why people cut through and be very honest with each other, or is there other reasons?
That's the thing. It's not inherently a dangerous place if you look at it statistically, but I guess the reality of getting recruited to the military, 18, you guys go to college, we go to the military, and that kind of sits in the background and kind of directs how you act. And nowadays it's much better, but in the 90s, a lot of terror attacks and empty malls and, reality of fear that definitely was there. Again, if you look at the numbers, it was never really bad compared to other stuff going on. But still, it gets to you.
Right. It's kind of always in your mind. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting how you say, like, statistically it might not be there, but as humans we're very anecdotal, isn't it? So we respond to things that are new, and there might be more deaths in the U.S. to lung cancer by a factor of 100 versus, say, terror attacks. But of course that's what we talk about. Do you ever think about the man that you would be like without your military service? Would you even be doing what you're doing now?
It's definitely changing your perspective, and definitely changed my perspective of movement. And it's a big chunk, and it's something that we prepare for in high school, and we get very physical to get ready for all the special operation tests and various exams and drills. So it definitely changed my physicality, and I think it sits in the heart of a lot of the physicality back home. And at the same time, things like martial art sometimes take a bit of a weird angle after you do stuff in the military, where it doesn't feel very real sometimes to Israelis. The martial art seems kind of funny, and it's a very different experience, I think, than doing military service in the UK or the US. First, it's obligatory, and second, just the whole way that it changes us is different. It's not something we like to talk about too much. It's not mentioned a lot afterwards. Yeah.
But you're protecting your home turf, you're protecting your family. The conflict is very real, it's very nearby. It's different than if you're in the British Territorial Army. We don't realistically have to worry about anybody coming in here and, bombing my grandmother's house. That's not realistically going to happen. Is that what you mean, that kind of really brings it home, or makes it a little bit different there?
Yeah, what you're saying is right, but in the end of the day, you're fighting for your friends, you're fighting with your friends, and that doesn't change if you're in the UK and you're deployed somewhere and you're seeing some action, or if you're in Israel. So I guess that thing doesn't change, but something else changes in the way that everybody's involved, and there is like this feeling that people went through it and they know, but nobody kind of talks too much about it.
It seems like, if you talk about this service, it seems like it would be a country full of really tough guys. I've met a few guys that have come from Israel that have come through here. Some are in the tech scene around here, and I'm always like, okay, I wouldn't, he could probably handle himself in a fight. You can tell guys give off an aura, especially when they've been through some tough things, is that they don't project this sense of insecurity and neediness that you see some kind of tough guys do. I was wondering do you think it in a weird way breeds out, maybe the feminine side of the males that might be the more creative side or that kind of thing? I never actually even thought about this. I wasn't even going to ask you, but I was wondering if you think of something like that, because you're a creative guy.
Yeah, it all kind of, correlates, and, you pull on a shirt, every atom in the shirt gets affected. Everything is connected. And I'm sure in some way it desensitizes you, and sensitivity is a very important concept inside creativity. And maybe the most important concept, to have this sensitivity to the options, to the possibilities, and then flowing within those possibilities in a creative process. I can see that affecting things. For sure, it's a very deep and a very long-lasting kind of effect. The more you were involved, the more you got to do in the military, which thankfully I didn't get to do too much, and I'm glad for that, for sure.
I have a lot of people that come through here, and some are quote unquote famous, or some are in politics, some are writers, and I look at you and I look at the impact you have. I have a lot of friends that are in mixed martial arts, and they can't say enough good things about you. And obviously on the web, everyone really likes you, and I think it's more about your movement and more about your philosophy, because I don't think people are drawn into just movement. I think there's a whole piece behind it, and I was wondering if you could even explain it to yourself when you take a look back and you're saying, why is this such a big thing? Is it because of this underlying philosophy that you have, or what you're telling to people? Why do you think it is?
Well, first, it's very important to say that you don't sit down and, hash plans and create, big, long-term philosophical approach. It's more of a reactionary reality, where you react to things and you unravel. You more unravel. You pull on strings, and you let that dictate, your approach. And that's definitely how I approached it. I'm not some form of a genius that sat down and kind of, thought this out years in advance, and I'm just, executing a plan. I don't believe in planning. I believe in reacting, and the planning happens on a very short term. The philosophy to movement, it's something that, it happened. It happens, like Bruce Lee said, I don't hit, it hits, it happened to me. It
hits all by itself, that's what he said,
yeah,
right? Famous line from Enter the Dragon.
Yeah, right? And I think the best stuff is like that. And many times we don't let things happen because of planning, controlling.
Right.
So I was just moving. I was just, doing martial arts, and then I got into capoeira, which was a lot more movement, basically. And it struck me. I was in love. I was in this romance with capoeira for 15, 16 years. basically thinking of myself as capoeira. You know, I always said, like, how can I stop capoeira? I am capoeira. You know, you can't stop what you are. And yeah, with the search of bettering myself and my students, I started to teach very early, and I had a big following back home, a lot of students. I opened up a training center, started to develop everyone, and I was searching for tools. I was searching for answers and trying to get to the next level. And that got me to research more and more, get into other stuff, because the answers were not there. They're not part of capoeira. For example, you do BJJ, but there is no much information on how to keep your body healthy while doing BJJ, inside BJJ. You have to go out and search for other tools. And I was searching for those tools, and while doing it, I kind of lost track. And I ended up actually enjoying other stuff and doing them not for the sake of capoeira anymore. And that got me into the realization that what is the connection there? What is this invisible thread that goes through all these disciplines? And it was movement.
Did you feel like you were betraying capoeira in the beginning?
Oh, 100%, yeah.
So it was like a lover to you.
Yeah, and I'm a radical guy. I'm known for it. That's the first thing that people will tell you. I'm the full out going for it, and I was called in capoeira, there are nicknames, and my nickname was Missionario, the missionary. I was the capoeira missionary. I had very extreme following, students that lived with me, ate with me, you know, everything was for capoeira, and I thought of myself as that, and it was extremely difficult to make the transition. So at first I kind of had to cheat myself that I'm still doing it for those reasons, but eventually had to face it and realize it, and then communicate it also with my students. And that got into a very interesting point where nowadays I believe it's not about what you want to learn. It's about what the teacher want to teach you. And people hate hearing it. If you find a real teacher, and if you find a real process, it doesn't matter what he teaches, what it teaches, what she teaches. It just matters that you found that thing. So if I'll find a real violin teacher, I'll study violin. Mastery of everything is the mastery of mastery. It's the mastery of yourself. And
so you're saying people are searching for the truth. They might not necessarily, even at your seminar this weekend, be searching for movement. They might be searching for direction.
100%. They come to me because they think they know what I do, and actually it's so far from what they think they know what I do. But then I change their mind about it, and then they want to do this thing. Not in a bad way, in a way that I present to them a bigger, better thing, a bigger dogma. You must choose a dogma still. You must have some form of a leading dogma in your practice, in your life. I just show them a bigger umbrella. So people think it's about handstands and, you know, jumping on the rings and doing flips or whatever. And actually, our work is way, way beyond that. It's a completely different and a huge paradigm shift in the way that you think about your practice and your movement and your body. And that is sometimes hard to deal with because you meet your demons when you meet that. And sometimes you have this reaction, no, that's not what I came to learn. Yeah. But mostly, interesting enough, when you're doing a good job, people accept it. And it's a life-changing moment. In many of our workshops, in the end of this weekend, just 2 days, people burst out crying, people change future plans, people write me letters, hand me letters in the end of the workshop. It's an amazing experience to see that and to be part of it. And for me, it's a huge honor. Huge honor. You
know, if I hadn't had experienced that myself, I would think you're crazy. But yeah, it's funny. A lot of guys in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they go there to learn how to say beat up guys, and they're like, okay, I'm going to come and learn how to beat up guys. And when they do it for a while, they realize that they find out why that they're actually fighting themselves. You know, and it's all about maybe not fighting yourself anymore. And you know, you see these huge changes in personalities. And I'm guessing that's a little bit of what you're describing happens with your seminars and your students?
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes reality forces you into that corner because you came to do one thing and maybe you've done it. And when you've done it, it's a bad day.
Because then it's over.
It's over. And then you can make the obvious choice, next challenge. But at a certain point you realize, I'm going to get all this stuff. Or I'm not going to get all this stuff. But anyways, there is something bigger that must lead me here. You know, like I remember the first day I got a one-arm handstand. I was like 3 years focused on this skill.
That's how long it took you.
Yeah.
And you started from a very strong base.
And actually, I started, yeah, you can say it's a strong base compared to another person. But I'll tell you, some of my students learned how to do a one-arm handstand under the process that I offered in 3 months. It took me 3 years. And I did it myself. I taught myself. I had very little communication with people who could do it. And I had to kind of create a process for myself. The day I got it was a weird day. It was, what now? You know, this emptiness hits you. And it's with everything big, with you know, making your first million, with anything big. And then after it happens enough times, you start to realize that you have to kind of operate on a different dogma. These challenges are not enough, you know, like, and that changes what you are searching inside what you do, or it changes what you do. So for example, BJJ might not be enough at a certain point, or you would make the transition and find within your practice in BJJ what you need, a bigger thing, a bigger dogma.
And so, for example, like the one-arm handstand, you get that, and that's a challenge off your list. And of course, now you can set up the next challenge and the one-arm pull-up and this. And then you're realizing that, hold on a second, this is not making me happy, and my life is not about overcoming the next challenge. And now I need to evolve into what am I doing? Whether that's not even teaching or learning about yourself. And it can be hard. Like you said, you're probably looking at yourself, what do I do now?
It's a very common thing to realize, you know, as they say, the laundry after the ecstasy. It's a very famous book. Okay. You still have to do the laundry. You know, you got into the ecstasy. Right. Wake up the next day. So in a way, you still form challenges and operate according to them. It doesn't stop you from doing that, but you do it from a different perspective. So for example, one thing that changed in the way that I approach things was understanding that I need to decentralize my approach to movement, to practice, to life, so I can adapt better to the unraveling of reality in front of me. For example, if you're a hand balancer and you lose your arm, it's a bad day to be alive. It's over. And you're not ready because you centralized all of your efforts in one area, and now it's over. But if you are working with a very big spectrum, then you're able to adapt and react better. And you're able to form challenges and react to them much better. So in a way, I still go after skills and I still go after qualities, but I do it with also a kind of a diffused mind a bit at times, in a good way, not in a bad way.
Not to be too invested in each one of these pieces.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And I'm sure the other side of it, not to make it look all very, you know, utopian, is you might be pursuing with less fire and with less intensity, but that's fine because there is a war to win and not a battle to win. And I think it comes with age, with experience, and with understanding. And I'm a big coward, you know. I'm very afraid, and that keeps me very safe. Like I'm preparing for the future. I'm not slamming myself into the wall and realizing it too late. I was always very careful and always very calculated, and I'm glad in that regard that I was able to prepare myself for the road to come.
And you said you're scared, so are you prepared to lose your arm? Is that what you're saying? Are you more prepared now than, say, you were 5-10 years ago?
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we will lose everything, you know, and it's part of the thing. We are one of my good friends, Joseph Rusk, he talks about the fact that we're actually cracking our shells. To release ourselves, we basically age. We crack our physicality so something can come out and something can happen. And you can look at it metaphorically, esoterically, it doesn't matter, but it is a process where you basically discover who you are, whether you want it or not. Mastery will come to you with age in a way.
Right.
And you're going to discover these things as your end comes closer and closer.
You must almost submit to the aging process, and there isn't much choice because you're faced with a new reality every day, aren't you? And so you have to adapt in some way. And I know you're a big proponent of saying there are cons with every, pros with every cons. And if you focus on one thing, you are by definition going to make sacrifices in another piece, which is an interesting idea. And I want to get to that. For people that don't know about your practices, can you tell me about, on a base level, what is your concept of self-dominance and what, for example, you're going to be doing for the next 2 days? If I showed up tomorrow morning in Northampton at your seminar, what will it look like in there?
Mm-hmm. All right, so that's the $1 million question. Yeah, because
Does everyone ask you this?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, for sure. Nobody, from the outside, it's very hard to understand what we're doing. So what we are actually doing is we're showing only the outer shells of our practice, and because the inner stuff, the inner shells, are not well presented in a media setting, nor in a book, and they can only be experienced on a very personal level. But let's say really discuss it honestly, and I'll try to get across a little bit of what we do. When a person comes to us, we start by developing kind of a core practice, and that core practice changes. There is no one core, but by individualizing the kind of core perspective, we might develop some basic strength. We might kind of invest some time in protecting joints and articulations. We will develop some basic mobility, and then we will start to feed more and more movement nutrition, which is a phrase that I coined a few years ago. But basically, I look at movement as food, and the necessity to chew up on stuff and develop your teeth and your digestive tract, as opposed to kind of the liquid nutrition that we get more commonly these days in movement practice. So we start to take all of these abilities and skills, and we start to develop an intelligent mover, someone who can deal with ever-changing environments. And it means learning new stuff constantly, never being master of anything. I never mastered anything. I'm not a master, although this title has been put on me. I don't like it, and I don't believe in the word, in a way. Then using what you have. And these core elements are usually kind of developing a basic control, upper body strength, lower body strength, the ability to do some basic human skills like squat and transition from lying down to standing up, and sprint and hang. And then going into the real fun stuff. Once that is addressed, and then you can really explore, and it's an endless thing. So, for example, one day I'll wake up and I'll do a martial art practice, or boxing, or I'll go to BJJ class and work there. The next session I'll go take a contemporary dance improvisation class. The next I will do a strength session to make sure all these basic skills are there. Then I'll go rock climbing. Then I just keep on, and that's the big part of what you do when you're already on the intermediate, higher levels. Then I also have like big projects, which I take on myself, and all my students do the same. So, for example, for the next few months, I will research a concept, for example, moving fast. This is a concept that I have been researching lately. Just to be able to move fast, regardless of technique. Not sprinting fast, I mean moving fast, moving your hand fast, moving your legs fast. Just experiencing and researching that. In the next few days, we lead a group of people in a variety of drills. We do a bit of strength work, more kind of a gymnastics-oriented strength work, and we do a little bit of hand balancing, and that's two aspects that everybody knows. But then we'll also be using a concept that I call kinetic koans, like movement riddles. And we'll throw people into movement riddles and ask them to solve those riddles and teach them how to deal with those riddles. And then we'll also be doing some locomotive patterns, which is a whole language I developed from my background, how to locomote and move across the floor in a very interesting way. And then we'll be doing some hanging work, which is pretty rare. Everybody's doing pulling, but only kind of rock climbers and a little bit gymnasts are doing hanging work, which is a really cool stuff and fun stuff. So those are some examples.
Okay, so if I stuck a GoPro in the corner, these are the movements I would be seeing. And what's the subtext? What is going on under the surface of this weekend, for example? You know, what are you really teaching?
First, to embodiment. You have no choice. You live in a body. People ask us, what's the prerequisites for the event? So one of my students, he answered, to have a body. Yeah. and we all have a body, and we all move. We have no choice. The only question is, how well are you doing it? And most people just don't have the user manual for their own machinery.
Why is that? Why aren't we given a user manual as humans?
We've moved away from it. We're not forced anymore into developing the user manual.
Okay.
And when we are not forced to do stuff, we lose it. And that's a very common thing that happens to us. And then we have to approach it in a completely different way and regain those abilities. And that's kind of the romantic kind of paleo perspective. But I don't operate according to this dogma alone. I believe we are now moving also a certain part of the population better than ever. And I believe we are the most complex movers on the planet. Although we like to romanticize the animal kingdom, we are the most complex movers on the planet. And it sits in the heart of how we ascended to the top of the food chain. Our movement capabilities. Brain was a tool for those movement capabilities. We can climb not as well as other primates, and we can't run as fast as the cheetah, but we can mimic all of these animals pretty much, and we can go into the water, and we can go into the trees, and we can operate on the ground, and we can develop all kinds of tools and move in very complex ways. So we are the most complex movers on the planet.
If I was a banker, Wall Street, you know, or city trader here in London, and I'm going to show up tomorrow on Saturday, what are the range of my emotions going to be like? Am I going to be frustrated at some point? Am I going to be confused with kind of what you're teaching? Do you see kind of like a typical range of emotions from people coming in? You must be used to it by now.
Yeah, we're very careful with people in that regard because I am very connected and realized many years ago the abuse that goes on. It's very easy to traumatize people, and it happens a lot in martial arts, and you must know a lot about this.
Yeah.
BJJ is a huge world of abuse. Huge. Let's be very frank. And
I was going to think boxing at first because I know so many extreme cases where someone throws someone in a ring when they don't belong there and they get hurt. I don't see that kind of specific thing happening in jiu-jitsu, but please tell me your thoughts.
It's actually, I'll give it to you as it is. Like, there are certain cultures that do it more than others, and the Brazilian culture is a huge, huge culture that in their physicality, they're amazing movers, amazing. But there is a lot of abuse going on within the martial arts in Brazil. And it definitely happens also in BJJ, where certain positions are held for a bit too long, and, you know, a lot of like stuff that shouldn't be there always. It's not always necessary. Yes, we're doing martial arts, but you are actually preventing people from progressing with this. You're traumatizing them. And for sure in boxing it happens a lot. When I started boxing, I went to train with some of the Russians in Israel, the Russian immigrants, and I was the only one, you know, kind of speaking Hebrew there. And I was abused 100%, you know. I was humiliated, abused, and I had to, you know, chew down on it and deal with it. And yeah, I was okay eventually, but definitely it carried something in my mind, and I left boxing for a while. The next time I went to box with my current teacher, Jacob Dascalo is an amazing coach, and I realized there is another way.
Right.
And I saw a really careful and very successful long-term process where the coach is not afraid to throw the white towel in the right moments and taking one step forward and maybe 3 backwards, and again building up a few single steps forward and kind of realizing who is he working with. Movement is the same. If you throw someone into movement challenges and he experiences he slaps a title on himself, puts a title, I'm uncoordinated, I'm not talented enough, I'm not gifted, and it's not for me. And this I don't allow in my workshops, in my classes, in my work. And I talk about it, and I put it out there, and I tease people. And if they're good, then I'm going to go deeper and deeper, and this should be individualized. Sits in the heart of how we approach things. We individualize things. There are no protocols. And that's a major reason behind the misunderstanding of what we do, because people look for protocols. They want to, okay, that's what they do. Or this is what they do. But actually, everything is context for me. So, yeah, very few people understand what I'm doing and how to approach it. And those are the people who work with me and work for me. And they're very close people to me. They've been spending time with me for years. I will never certify someone over a weekend, over a year. Because I believe it's all context, and it requires a very wide set of tools and understanding and a certain mindset to be a teacher.
You talked about dogmas earlier, and you talked about capoeira. It's interesting, the most famous videos and pictures of you are in your one-handed stand, one-armed handstand. Again, like the flashy moves, like you said about capoeira. And are you ever at risk of becoming known for those things, which ultimately aren't really what you're about?
Yeah, for sure. And it happened. It already happened.
Right.
Many people recognize me for those movements, and
do you like that or do you not like that?
I don't like it, but I used it. I have to realize what a tool it was for me. A tool to get to more people and deliver the right message. And I've conned my way into people's hearts and minds and used what I can use. Used, everything from my body and into my movements, and then later I arrived at a point where I can deliver a more potent message and tell you the truth. It's a bit of a secret. Not many people know, but I talk about it with my close people. I've lost my interest in handstands a long time ago. I still teach it and I still share it because I believe that's what people need in certain aspects, but I'm not there.
That's blasphemy.
Yeah, and I'm not there. I've moved.
How could you be? You spent so much time perfecting it. If you were still interested in handstands, I would think something's wrong with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but a lot of people will do that for years and years and will just take the next challenge. I could always take a next challenge. My handstands are garbage. They could have been much better. Yeah, I can stand on one arm. It's super impressive, but there are people who eat me for breakfast with handstands. And I made a choice not to be there because I realized that's not what I want. I don't want another position and in perfecting another small detail while I'm losing sight of so much stuff on the other side. So I really formed a practice around it, and I help people achieve those things that I was once interested in. But me, myself, I've moved so many subjects since handstands and researched so much stuff, and it's a never-ending thing. I believe like the rest of the pyramid will just dry out if I don't continue and have this kind of a research mindset.
Talk to me about dogmas and and getting past your own dogmas. You first set up to differentiate yourself from the world, and then you end up becoming a slave to them. Tell me your thoughts on that, and how do you avoid it?
All right, so first, in my eyes, you must choose a dogma. There has to be a leading thing in your life, that dictates the methods, that dictates the goals. People confuse these three things very often. And for example, they will set up goals that have no relationship with the dogma. They're related to the methods. Then they will fail achieving the goals because the dogma is not connected to these goals and the methods are not producing the right results. And then they will change the methods instead of realizing maybe they should change the goals or change the dogma. It's very difficult to do. Changing your dogma takes guts. It takes bravery. It takes courage because you live for long periods of time with ideas of who you are, and then you realize that's not who I am, and it's can be a very dark moment.
What's an example of one of your dogmas, or what was an original dogma?
Capoeira, for example. Okay. I'm a capoeira guy. That's my dogma. That's my thing,
Right. And then your goals and methods would be what?
Then I was one of my goals was to move really well. And I realized, I don't want to just move capoeira really well. I want to move really well. But then the methods that I used didn't produce the results because I kept on holding to the capoeira dogma, trying to kind of bring all these tools of movement, these methods of movement into the capoeira context. And if they didn't match the capoeira context, then I wouldn't use them because I'm the dogmatic capoeira guy. And that was a huge dogma for me. Another dogma is, it can go very deep. I'm Israeli. I live in Israel. I'm very, patriotic, etc. Another dogma might be, I need a relationship. It's a must. Everybody must live, in a relationship, and etc. It's always there. And then at a certain point, you realize, who's the master? I'm not the master. I coined the dogma years ago. It became my master. And now I'm behind the dogma instead of the dogma being a servant to me. And still, to replace that dogma, you must have a new dogma.
Right.
So eventually, you kind of are very careful in the way that you form your dogmas. And I was very careful. So after 15, 16 years in capoeira, I didn't make the next mistake of being an acrobat, being, a dancer. I realized I love movement on all of its shades. Utilitarian movement, artistic movement, breathing, any form of mind-body connection. And if it's just kind of a Descartesian existence from the head up, a very cognitive, then I'm not so interested. It's always about the connection to the body. And that's why I use that dogma. And I think it's a good dogma to have. It's wide enough for me to shift and move. And I have room for movement, literally, inside this dogma. And I can change what I do. I'm not the handstand guy. I'm not the gymnastics guy. I was never a gymnast.
Right.
I use whatever works for my movement dogma. So the tools, the methods are borrowed from a lot of these isolated aspects. But my dogma is bigger.
You're here this weekend and you're going to teach, 80, 100 people at your seminar, and it sounds like you will continue to do this. You're walking the earth like Cain and teaching people all of these things. How far is the human race now behind where they should be when it comes to movement? I know you've said that the fitness industry never impressed you in the past. You said it's a limited world with many problems, a polluted world. How bad are we off right now as humans with the fitness industry, and where do you come in?
Yeah, there is things have been the order of things have been disrupted. We don't think of ourselves as movers, human beings, but we think of ourselves as specialists. And I kind of created this small phrase to describe it, where Homo sapiens, bigger than Homo motus, is bigger than Homo specialitas. So the Homo sapiens, first, you're a human being. Second, you're a mover. Mike Tyson needs to squat down to lift his child off the floor. And then you're a specialist. And these first two layers, many times they're not addressed. And so we are lacking, many specialists are lacking as human beings. And you see it.
They go straight to specialism.
They're just lacking the tools of different layers. It's not addressed. So some of the biggest douchebags out there are specialists in the top of their field. They're just not good human beings.
Okay. Does that have anything to do with the path they took to get there?
Yeah, 100%. It's just a lot of focus on a different layer. Then as movers, they also suck at. You believe, like an amazing boxer like Roy Jones Jr. is an amazing mover. Not necessarily. Maybe he's not the best example because he can still do some things. I saw him playing basketball pretty nice, but still, as a mover, I'll tell you, it's not enough. I don't think he's a great mover, and etc.
What else? Certain sports you see where you're like, they're just not a great mover.
Yeah, it's very common. Most sports are like that because most sports have lost sight of what's important. Most sports were there to serve the movement layer.
Right.
The movement world was the biggest universe around it. And then we created all these sports, and then the sports created the world of fitness.
Right.
And in a way, it always existed in various levels, but when I take a very black and white kind of point of view, that's what you see. Nowadays, the world of fitness is the bigger world. There are more people doing shitty fitness out there than people actually doing martial arts, dancing, moving, rock climbing, I don't know what.
Which is different than 20, 30 years ago. That wasn't the case.
Yeah, for sure, yeah. And it all comes, the golden era of bodybuilding and our physical culture have taken this, turns, and the media served that thing. And we took on this aesthetic thing, and we tried to reverse engineer a capable body and kind of put on ourselves the aesthetic of it, but we're left with nothing. It leads you to being sick, incapable, depressed, where you have these crazy bodies, they can't do nothing.
I mean, look at 50 years ago, go on a beach, and then go now, you're going to see it's like different human beings, right? It's almost like different creatures.
Yeah, 100%.
So you see people in the top of their fields that are specialists that are douchebags and not they don't know how to move, is what you're saying.
Yeah, they're not very good with movement, not on a very human layer where the patterns that you must do daily. You're going to lay in a bed. Sounds funny, but many people can't lie down these days. For example, the average IFBB pro bodybuilder needs to use like 6 pillows to get comfortable at night. So, dear friends, you've made a terrible mistake. You have made a terrible mistake. You took yourself, and you're immobile. You've trained yourself out of mobility, out of movement. You slept on these aesthetics that are degradable as well. You sacrificed health, and you can't fucking move.
So there's no win. There's no win there at all.
Well, I'm sure there are wins, but it's so far back on the curve.
Right.
You can go after aesthetics and get some nice benefits with movements until a certain point, but then it's over. And notice how people say, they still make the mistake and say, he looks very strong. No, you can't know if he's strong or not. You have no way to know because it's comprised of so many different elements. And even strength is not a very reliable predictor of movement, right, as you know from grappling.
Yeah.
So we're still making these mistakes. Yeah, this needs to be corrected.
Is it being corrected? Are you having any success?
Well, I'm a mosquito. I'm a small mosquito, and I'm buzzing around, and I'm making, my noise, but I'm not yet.
Okay.
And on a large perspective, maybe my students will be the ones who will do. Maybe I will never get to see that. But there is a lot happening as well on the edges of the world of fitness and movement, and there are some voices starting to promote more movement, and we definitely have been a major part of that. And some big companies and corporations have noticed it, and I've got a chance to work with like Nike and come there and speak in front of the board of directors and give them my perspective. So definitely there are things happening where people realize it's not necessarily fitness that we want to do. We actually wanted to move, and now we know it. Now somebody said it. Now we realize that there are other set of tools that are missing, and you can actually learn how to move. You can perfect it. You can progress in it. There is a process there. You're not lost, but we're still not there. Because people are lost. Even when they get the message, I want to move, they get lost. And the only thing that we've been doing so far is just offering them kind of a very private perspective where we take on students and we touch them face to face or very, very intimately, even through online coaching. We haven't taken this on a larger scale, but it's definitely something that will happen.
On the edge of that fitness industry is CrossFit. That probably is going in the right direction, as in you're seeing functional movement, you're seeing, Olympic lifts, which I know you're a fan of. So how do you feel about when you see things like CrossFit? I know in an interview you said they've brought a lot of good things to the industry.
CrossFit is definitely a very positive phenomenon in my eyes. And everybody likes to bitch and moan on CrossFit from the outside.
And everyone who comes on the show, everyone wants to ask me about CrossFit. They're like the whipping boy, but yet they're a huge movement at the same time.
Yeah. I think it's a very largely positive force. And it definitely brought in a lot of movements. So, for example, just in the first few years of CrossFit, you're going to have to learn a lot of movement, deal with a lot of patterns. Yeah, it's limited. It's not about movement.
Right.
Because the center of the CrossFit model didn't place movement. It placed capacity, which is a very mechanical concept.
Right, that's the workout of the day, the WODs. It's how much can you do, post your result for time.
Exactly.
It's quantifying the movement, right?
It's in a way trying to quantify, yeah. Although this is not mechanics,
right.
This is biomechanics.
Right.
There is a huge difference in the way that you approach biomechanics and mechanics. And any beginner scientist would have caught on to this for a long time ago and would say there is a major issue. So in classic physics, like moving an X amount of mass from point A to point B is always the same, where you look at it from a biomechanical perspective, the engine that moves that mass changes the whole perspective. And sometimes the longer path is the more efficient one, not the shortest linear line. And you see that all the time. For example, a pull-up, to pull up and down in one line is not very efficient. The behind-the-back pull-up, for example, is much harder than assuming some form of an arc. But physically, you're moving the same amount of mass from point A to point B. Against gravity. I'm talking about against gravity here. Right. So that's it. I think CrossFit is a good thing. I think CrossFit brought back a lot of good stuff. I think all of these people who like to criticize CrossFit, they eat the breadcrumbs below CrossFit's table. And they need to have a bit of respect there. And they need to realize where they stand. And then you can also criticize. That's fine. You can also say things and you can present things. And I think the CrossFit community is a very open community. There are the hardcore fans that, don't really listen to anything and just, blah, blah, blah. But then there are a lot of intelligent people within the CrossFit industry. And I think a lot of them are geared wanting to get more tools for movement. And I've been working for years in all across the world with CrossFitters, and I like it. They're hard workers. They're open-minded mostly. And some of them are moving in a movement perspective and changing their minds, and that's because CrossFit has brought them to the point where they can make this paradigm shift. While the Globo Gym goer is so far away,
Right.
Just can't hear you.
Right. He's not thinking. He's coming in and doing these standard linear movements every day and writing them down on his card, and you would much rather have a CrossFitter than that guy. Obviously. Yeah. But what is CrossFit missing then? You talk about the WODs as being some kind of an attempt to quantify, and then that misses the point of, for example, what you're doing.
No, it's a huge. There are so many things missing. It's the funny thing is most CrossFitters are not humble enough to see how much is missing, but once you show it to them, they accept it. But they're not in themselves. They believe that they're working on their weakness, for example. There is a very large talk about working on your weaknesses. Working on your weaknesses requires sometimes a completely different set of tools. It's not about strength. It's not about, like, there is so much stuff happening in the mental game, in the development of movement patterns, coordination, the formation of habits and balance, a lot of stuff that is not addressed in CrossFit on a large scale. CrossFit operates with quantifiable patterns. That's already problematic because you eliminated a lot of non-quantifiable patterns. It doesn't work with improving movement intelligence, the ability to adaptability, the ability to react to changing environments. So give me the guy with the biggest engine, but if he can't manipulate the car, throw him in a BJJ match and he can't do anything. He's missing the tools. Some of them are perceived as technical tools, but it's not only that. Because of course he doesn't know BJJ, so give him the techniques. But there are other set of tools. And that's, for example, a lot of stuff that I'm doing with BJJ practitioners, MMA fighters. There is a layer of homo motus, the mover, that should be addressed. And it's somewhere between strength and conditioning and technical work.
Right.
This adaptability, this unknown, and the best of the best out there have this thing in common.
Right. You see Georges St-Pierre from the UFC, he was always doing box jumps. He was always doing all of these techniques, which seems like what you're talking about, somewhere between these two grounds, that had no direct application to martial arts, but yet it seemed to always come out in the cage with his explosiveness. And he was doing gymnastics before any other MMA fighter, I think, was doing it. Are those the kind of things you're talking about, or is that just the tip of the iceberg?
That's just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay, but I'm going in the right direction.
Yes. There are good things about what you say, but it's not enough in many ways. And a lot of these top-level fighters, you will see it happening in between the definitions. For example, stand-up, clinch, right, ground. But what is in between these things? This is something that I talked not so long ago with a good friend of mine, Frank Schunig in Germany, and he kind of opened my eyes to this and mentioned that what is in between is rarely explored. And the best of the best, they're very comfortable in this non-defined reality because they have tools from the layer of movement, from homo motus. Because the specialist, he learns about the clinch and he learns about the ground game and learns about stand-up. But while transitioning from area to area, the other more capable mover will take advantage. You see it big time on Rickson Gracie back in the day. Remember this moment where I think it was in Japan, somebody tried to flip him over and you just saw that his kind of acrobatic nature. Something that
almost in the air. And
he had complete awareness of where he was and he just landed on the other side, took the side control, took the mount, finished it. And another guy would just lose orientation. This is a very good example. Who in fighting works on air sense, orientation in space? This is something that every gymnast develops on the trampoline.
Right.
This is a great tool for fighters because they do find themselves being thrown, being moved around. Most of them just lose orientation, freeze up, and crash like a sack of potatoes just to wake up and continue from a defined position that they are more comfortable in. That's, again, just one example.
That's a perfect example. I bet most of those fighters rarely find themselves in that circumstance, except when they just got clipped in the cage and they don't practice that. And so it's you could see they're very disoriented you know, when that happens. Let's talk about martial arts really quickly. An Irish fighter named Conor McGregor, he is the first one I started hearing talking a couple years ago about movement. And I know it's a word that's now probably turned into its own have its own dogmas around the word movement. But he started saying, I'm a student of movement and I'm all about movement. It's like kind of the new breed coming up where you see these fighters that are embracing so many different aspects, are not only able to handle these transitions you're talking about, that can be creative during the transitions. Like they're not alarmed. They're excited by the possibility. The Anthony Pettis Showtime kick where he's kicking off the cage, probably not the best example, but what do you think of mixed martial arts now? Do you find it inspiring? Do you teach those guys? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting reality.
Because it is real. They test themselves every week in the cage for real circumstances.
This is a bit of a tricky thing.
Okay.
Very similar to the CrossFit dogma, where the testing grounds They are debatable. They're debatable. And if you change a bit the rules, you'll get a completely different outcome.
Right.
And a completely different set of skills that are required to achieve that outcome. Mixed martial arts is a great thing as well for movement, for the world of movement. It's a huge force taking a big chunk of fitness these days. So you see it all over the world. People are doing MMA, not for competition, for fitness.
Right.
And I actually think it's much better.
Right.
Than
you would rather see that.
Definitely.
Okay.
They're kicking, they're ducking, they're sprawling, and they're still doing their pull-ups, and they're still, wrestling, and they move a lot. If you look at their movements, they move a lot. And I wish we could actually quantify it. And there were a few attempts with the various bracelets that measure movement. But actually what we need is a suit that measures movement in any direction. And you would see that an MMA guy who is just moving a lot more, maybe even than a CrossFitter. I'm not talking about the load on him. He might not be loaded, but he's moving in a lot of directions and in an inorganic way.
Yeah.
And MMA is great for that. And
the creativity still amazes me. You'll see a new technique that it comes out of nowhere, and then you'll see the meme of that technique like multiply, and you'll then see the front kick to the face, and then you'll see 20 of those, and then you see us as humans and how we copy each other and how these things can happen.
It's a huge culture and very interesting one. For me, I know that a lot of people share the same opinion. Like the early days were the exciting days, the 90s. It's crazy, kumite kind of, idea. And then, of course, it went and specialized. Everybody realized this very quick learning curve of, a culture concentrated around a mutual goal. Although everybody's fighting everyone, they're getting into the top of the pyramid in what's the most efficient way to do that. And that's getting more and more boring in my eyes.
Okay.
I know that people who are involved inside, they're still excited because there's some stuff happening, but not as much as the old days, where every fight had like so much revelations, and all these traditional martial arts with the concept of grounding yourself completely failed. And it was replaced with mobility, footwork. So all this traditional martial artists trying to, you can never move a mountain kind of thinking, it just blew up in their face, So
yeah, it is a test. I mean, you can say it's quantified in the wrong way, but it is a dogma. It's a quantification. So at least you get to see these things play out. That's one good thing about it.
Yeah. It's a great thing. I just, as a phenomenon, I'm aware that it's already in the ending phases kind of its development because of the limitation in rules, because of the learning curve. We're progressing onwards, and for the general public, it's a lot less exciting than the early days. But that's the nature of things, who can blame it? Now there are a few weird attempts on group MMA fights. Did you see that?
I saw those, Brazil, of course.
A lot of people I saw some Polish thing.
2-on-2. And
2-on-2 and groups on groups and brutal and crazy. And those are attempts to kind of lateral development, not the vertical development.
Right.
Also very interesting to see what's going on there. Of course, it's, some people hate it and, it's not sport, but it's not sport in my eyes. It's not. It has been promoted as a sport in many ways, but there is a lot more there. Old school boxers look at it and a very problematic eye.
Yeah, boxers are they're very old school in that way. You talked about trauma earlier, and almost any martial art has kind of an aspect of trauma because it's a quote-unquote fight. And I was wondering if you find that ultimately hurts that art form. Because, for example, this weekend, what you're teaching these people will not be a confrontation, whereas a martial art almost is by definition ultimately based in a confrontation. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the trauma thing is a tricky thing. Trauma will happen. You're not going to prevent it. You just need to provide tools to deal with the trauma. And that's what's lacking in a lot of martial arts and martial artists and teachers in martial arts. They don't provide the tools because you're going to get traumatized. You're going to get abused. And you need to kind of create a set of tools, very realistic tools, so you can get dirty. And we don't like to hear it. We don't like to hear that things get dirty in movement, in martial arts. We don't like to hear that it's not a probability, it's a certainty that it's going to happen. You're going to go out of alignment, you're going to get, held in a choke for a bit too long, and the best processes take this into account, and they anti-fragilize, as Nassim Taleb says, the person. Instead of just making things optimal, that's important, but you have to support it with anti-fragilizing the practitioner, especially in martial arts, where the chaotic environment is problematic for an utopian frame of mind. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. Very famous.
Very famous quote. So anti-fragilize, as in you look for a method of kind of toughening them up, but in a very predictable and non-traumatic way.
Sometimes you have to use trauma to to get bulletproof from trauma, but in the right quantities. Use stress versus de-stress, just enough. You use stressors to condition the iron. That's how you do it, and also in a mindset that is not expecting predictable results. That's the most dangerous thing. We're planning, and we're going to get this result. It's not humble, and it's not real. All of your plans will ultimately change, and you're going to have to react. A more reactionary training versus a planning, a long-term planning that is not realistic in many ways. Learning how to react to changing environments, like breaking your hand in a boxing fight. And then you have to finish the fight with this broken hand inside. And you can see the people that come in from a certain perspective are able, for example, to switch their stance, place that hand behind, protect it, while others just have to give up. Okay, I broke my hand, it's over. Many legendary boxing fights have been won with broken limbs.
Yeah, MMA fights as well.
Yeah, same.
You talk about movement, and so the corollary of that is everyone asks you about what you do when you're not moving, which is what you're eating. And so I know this isn't necessarily what you specialize in, but everyone wants to know what Ido is eating. And I know people have asked you from the beginning. I know since '96, you were quote unquote paleo, whatever that means now. In the past, you've not had good things to say about vegans. I don't know if you still feel that way or if that was blown out of proportion. We've had the parkour athlete, Sebastian Foucan, the French guy, and then the English guy, Timothy Sheaf. He's been on the show a bunch of times. He's vegan. My vegan joke is, how do you know if someone's vegan? Wait 5 minutes and they'll tell you. And so I always give Tim a hard time, but he is on the front lines promoting veganism at all times, and it works obviously very well for him. What do you say about diet, paleo, vegan, anything?
Diet, exactly like movement, no general prescriptions, no protocols. Investigation, a wide set of tools, individualization. Having said that, there are some vectors, not coordinates, but vectors of direction of investigation. And that's what I am with time realizing more and more and more and more. I definitely originally started with when I investigated diets with the caveman kind of an approach and looking at our past to kind of realize what we should eat, what we shouldn't eat, and I've been using that for many years with myself. Then I had to tailor this approach to my students and the changing needs. And I'm still on that kind of journey, but in the last few months I went through a major shifts in what I use and what I don't use, and looking at hormonal shifts and trying to look at things in a different way, trying to get away from my own dogmatic thing.
Right.
Always testing. Am I the slave or am I the master of the dogma? And this was very important for me. Thank God I wasn't, even though I was a big part of the paleo movement and I talked about it, I always realized it's a title I don't want to slap on myself. And yeah, I didn't do that in a way. But when people did it, it was their choice, but not my choice. While movement is something that I definitely feel comfortable standing behind. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Animal proteins?
Animal proteins, I cannot see on a large scale people operating well without animal proteins. And there are many examples of people who do operate well. And I'll give you a lot of examples of parkour kids that eat McDonald's and smoke cigarettes.
Right.
So I'm not going to start to smoke cigarettes and eat McDonald's, and you can bring me the Germany's strongest man in the world and a million other individualized examples. This is not a quality debate. Another thing to say about vegans is they're the most hostile community out of all of the communities concentrating around nutrition. And I've made it a point not to go easy on them. And I think they think their shit doesn't stink. And the reality around us is a lot more complex, whether in sustainability, in animal blood on your hands, etc. And yeah, I think it's debatable. Nobody has any, reached the gospel truth. It's a complex reality, and we have it with a lot of stuff. Nutrition is one. So it's very important not to present it in that way. And I maybe made a mistake there that I should take responsibility for, where my experience with veganism was pretty bad throughout the years, students walking in and my own experiments, and just having to see again and again and again the same kind of problematic mindset, energy shifts, and development within movement. And maybe I made it too much of a point, and because I try to kind of shield myself, from that issue. But I'm sure there are very successful individuals out there operating with a vegan diet. The ones I respect the most are those who are not violent around it, don't believe that their shit doesn't stink, and they're holy, and those that also realize the need for individualization of the approach.
And in your history, in your past experience, when you have worked with the vegan students and that, or when you put yourself through it, there was something missing.
Yes. Yeah. Mostly that was my experience. But I'm sure I could have had other experiences with different people. But I took a generalization. Of course it's a generalization. I'm just one person. And I have to make up my mind and move in this complex world around me and choose my students. Part of my reality is I have to choose my students because there is too many people reaching out to me. So I made it a point to kind of create some kind of a filter. And that's Ido Portal's filter. What I feel sorry about is that I hurt some people's, feelings. And actually, in the last few years, I started to investigate more on an individual level before I made up my mind if I accept that person in or not. Where before, I just completely avoided it altogether.
Right. You're maturing a little bit.
I'm sure, yeah. Well, I have no choice, right?
Yeah, we said earlier. How are you dealing with your own aging?
Yeah, it's a big thing, huh? Some days better, some days worse.
How old are you?
I'm 34.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a constant change.
You're very in tune with your body, I'm guessing.
Try to be.
Although it is tough. It's tough to monitor yourself as a human, but I'm guessing you can notice things, and this is tougher or different than it used to be.
Yes. One of the biggest, one of my biggest personal problems is I developed a very close relationship with pain. And this relationship is counterproductive to aging. Where for me to realize I should stop is very hard many times. So this is very common in gymnastics, for example, where the way that your hands feel when you're practicing on these wooden bars, with so much friction, you're constantly in pain. One of my students and a good friend who was a gymnast many years, he told me 2 weeks after he retired from gymnastics, after 10 years of practice, he had all of a sudden a realization sitting in his kitchen, oh, my shoulders don't hurt. For For 10 years, his shoulders hurt. So you know what? You just register the worst pain at that specific moment. You don't register the rest. And this was part of how I grew up to move in movement.
Constantly pushing yourself through the pain barrier.
Yes.
To be able to do all of these things.
Yes, 100%.
Okay. Lactic acid, tendon pain, everything.
Everything. Just moving through it. And I had to change that thing and realize, you know, and I also had to realize the other side. While I'm changing this relationship with pain, I might be becoming a bit of a wussified version of myself. And it's a constant game between these things. And that's why I cannot say I have a utopian relationship with aging nor pain. I'm playing between the two. I'm pushing myself, but I'm learning also how to back off. And I'm definitely the most in tune I've ever been with my body. But maybe I'm not at my toughest point.
Right. Okay, that's a good answer. You say that there's sacrifices in everything you do. You say that if someone's doing yoga, they're getting the benefits, but they're also sacrificing some things because they're not doing something else. The same goes if you're bench pressing, the same goes if you're doing this. You've said the same thing about success. Anyone who's successful has made sacrifices to get there. What do you mean by that? Because a lot of people would say all of these things are a healthy life, you know, but you seem to be a little more matter of fact about things like that.
Yeah, people like to lump up a lot of stuff and present a very optimal, you know, reality where there is one dogma. I believe there is one major dogma. Each person has one major thing, the biggest driving force. And then there are many other kind of supporting dogmas and ideas, and then there is the methods as well, which are confused with dogmas sometimes. So, for example, movement is my dogma. It's not health, which means I'm not doing everything in my power to be the healthiest. I'm doing everything in my power to move well. Sometimes it goes hand in hand, but sometimes they separate. These two things go hand in hand until a certain point, and then they start to separate. For example, most of the specialists out there, they like to present things as, yeah, optimal. And I'm the best MMA fighter I can be, and I'm also promoting the best health possible. It cannot coexist. And it's a simple truth you can see. Yes, they can walk hand in hand to a certain point, and maybe you'll be healthier than the couch potato, but you could have been healthier if your main dogma was health. And your supporting dogma would have been MMA, etc. So sacrifice and success is very much like that. You know, success measured by money is not on top of my list. Just not. And I'm not doing things optimally in that regard, and I've sacrificed a lot of stuff for that. I've turned down large sums of money. I've
book deals or sponsorships.
Yeah, I gave the finger to a lot of people. You know, like I canceled, you know, things and that I didn't feel right with
because you didn't like the vibe or the message you were giving.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and the same with health. Although it would have been very common for me to say, I'm moving my health optimally and my movement optimally, and it goes hand in hand. I'm not going to lie to you. It does move hand in hand until a certain point, but I've been moving 8, 9, 10 hours a day for the last 10 years. I've passed that point. I am a very healthy person, but maybe I could have been even healthier. I intend to live long, but maybe I sacrificed a few good years and because of my movement choices. So it's all about sacrifices and keeping it very real and realizing that every choice is pulling the shirt and all the fibers of the shirt are being affected. You're not going to place these 3 points and they're all going to coexist perfectly together.
Let's talk about your success. You are spending weeks and weeks on end going around, meeting people, teaching them. I know that people on your Facebook page are always asking, Ido, when can we get a book? These private training sessions on Skype, they're just not scalable because you can't teach thousands of people at the same time. And the community definitely wants more from you. How do you balance that want and then that you probably have a desire to teach everyone with the fact that you can't do it in the way you want to do it.
Yeah, I don't let it pull me in. But there was a risk at a certain point that it will happen, because I created the beast and now the beast is pulling me in. And I make it a point to keep myself focused on what I want. And I make it a point that the close people to me keep me focused on what I want and support me in that regard. And because the bigger it goes, the more you're being pulled and affected by the audience. I don't want the audience to affect my message. I speak for them, I do for them from a place that I'm feeling very genuine and real about and happy about. So one of my choices was to develop a kind of a core group of ambassadors around me. And I've been devoting the last few years for that and working very closely with people because I felt the need to deliver that experience. And from there, we're going to scale it, bigger and bigger and provide more tools. But maybe at a certain point I'll say enough. Now it's not scalable beyond that point, and it's going to water down the message and the approach, the methods, the dogma.
How many ambassadors do you have, and how many would you like to have?
Yeah, there are, let's say, there are a core group of hundreds of students around the world very much involved with me. They come to all of our events. They make it a point to come once a year to the movement camp. They study with us. They train with us. They communicate with us. And then there is very much a small tribe around me of just a dozen people, or a bit more, that are very, very closely related. And they're like my close students. It's disciples, not even students. It's on a different level. Some people, I'm sure, look at it and think it's a cult, or we live together, we move together, we make it a point to spend time together, we do research together. I love it.
And you're comfortable with that?
I'm comfortable with that at this moment, and I know that this is going to provide more tools for more people in a quality way, in a way that I can support it. I don't want to, put something out there and realize it's not me. And it's a big risk. And it happens every day to people. The need for a book, and you put up a book. I'm not too old. I'm not old enough to write a book, That's what I feel like.
I mean, a book, I bet people have been asking you for a book for 5 years, right? 6 years, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Why no book?
Well, first, it's such a changing environment, walk beside me. Don't walk behind me. Don't walk in front of me, just walk beside me. That's what I can offer. Come in and let me share with you an experience. I'm a bit in front maybe in some aspects, or maybe in some other aspects you're a bit in front, but let me show you in this way and take you on this journey. And kind of a book is like, okay, you've arrived at the gospel truth, that's it. Now, not saying I'm not going to write the book. I'm sure I will at a certain point. I just want to kind of feel a bit more stable, because my mind is so erratic still, and my choices, my opinions, and they keep on changing, that I'm being Ido. I'm just trying to handle myself in that way and be genuine. Not just put things on a paper, and after 2 days I can't look at it, not to talk about after a year.
Right.
So I'm in a point where I'm not comfortable with that.
Okay, understood there. I told you before we started, I'm in this kind of strange transition point myself. I'm 43. I did jiu-jitsu for 10 years. My Thai boxing instructor is moving on. I have to do something different. I lift some weights. I do some running. But I don't even know what I'm going to do. But I really want to be excited about moving. And I don't know if I've been excited for a long time. And that's criminal, that I'm not excited about moving, especially when I meet someone like you. Now, I can't go to your seminar tomorrow because I have plans. How would I learn more about, how would I learn from you? What is the way I can? Because I can't read a book. If I look at your videos on YouTube, I see your one-arm handstand, and that's so impressive. I don't know where to start. But what you must get people ask you all the time. What should I do?
The simplest answer is there is no simple answer, and you need to do research. If you're in this point that you want to be excited about movement, the importance of it, you don't want to lose sight of it. It's part of you, it's part of your background. You need to ignite that motivation and inspiration again by research. And it can be free of charge. Just go online and use what we put out there and what other people also put out there and do some research into it, and you will just unravel. You'll pull the string and it will start to create this whole chain of reaction. You need a practice. Everybody needs a practice, a physical practice. You need to look at it in that way. There is no difference between your weight training, running, BJJ. It's all movement practice. So first thing, change your titles. Right. That will open your mind to so much. And then you need to start to dive deeper and deeper and create tools to serve the needs that you developed and the goals that you developed. And we offer a very personal perspective, and we assist people through online coaching with that thing. We develop them, and it's very non-compromising, very demanding, expensive, because we're limited in our ability to help people on such a personal level. We also offer events. We also offer seminars and internships and movement camps. So we create the ignition moment there to research more movement and realize what is actually movement and what can I do. That's what people should be doing. But it's not a simple answer, right? I don't give you like a door, Right. Yeah, you can go to my website, www.idoportal.com, and you will start there. But I don't want to give you the illusion that it's going to be that simple. That's just pulling the first string. And then you're going to have to put up some hard work to writing the user manual for this body and understanding what you want to do with this body. Let me tell you, you're 43, you've been practicing in a lot of chaos, BJJ, fighting. This is not going to last a lot longer.
As in, I won't be able to do that.
You won't be able to deal with
mentally or physically?
Physically.
Okay.
With a chaotic environment for so long. It's a problem. Look at the top level grapplers, and I'm not talking about fingers and it's knees, backs, herniated discs. You know why? Because it's a chaotic environment. You cannot throw yourself so many times into the washing machine and come out okay. And you can maximize your ability to deal with it, but you will need other things. And the more you age, the more you need to decentralize your efforts. You're not a martial artist, you're a mover. You're not a fitness guy, you don't try to keep fit. You want to move, you want to have a practice around it. You want to research your body, you want to work with it, And it starts with simple stuff. We promoted stuff like squatting, 30 minutes a day for 30 consecutive days. Just accumulate, not in one go, just accumulated time spending in a squat.
Down in a squat.
In a squat, in a flat foot squat. Because that's the original use behind the squat, not getting stronger. That's the fitness perspective. The movement perspective is it's a resting position.
Before we had chairs. That's
exactly.
What you said. Right.
And still out there.
Sorry to keep you in a chair for so long.
Yeah, that's okay, because around it I will move. So I'm not hating on the chairs for movers, but I'm hating on the chairs for the general public, those who don't move. Yeah, and that's a basic perspective. Another thing is I really recommend that you do some hanging. You need to hang from stuff. You're supposed to do that with those shoulders. Which means if I don't see any anchor points around, it's not good. You need to have an anchor point everywhere. In your office, everywhere. If you have that anchor point, it can be a simple chin-up bar in the doorway. You will hang from time to time. Right. But if you don't, for sure you will not. Right. And those are just basic two concepts, that will keep you moving. Instead of approaching it with a workout perspective, I tell you, spread it throughout the day. Put some squats in between your emails. Every third email, do it in a squat. Answer your phone in a squat. Wait for the train in the squat. That's a movement perspective, and that's what we want to do. We want to educate people on such things, but there is no simple solution there. It's education.
It really is a paradigm shift with you, and it's getting away from language, and it's getting away to all these preconceptions we have in our head about what movement is for us as human beings. It's quite complex, isn't it? On Google Campus now, they have the treadmill desks that they do their computer on. I'm guessing you're a fan of that over a chair.
Not sure it's the direction we should be moving.
Okay.
A changing environment is the best.
Okay.
There is no one thing. Even walking can be overused. Even water will become toxic at a certain level. That's the thing. There is no one movement. There is standing tables. No. It might be better than a chair,
Right. But
It's still not
stagnation.
Yes,
Okay.
it's still stagnating you in a different position.
10 years ago, Ido Portal is enjoying himself and he's discovering movement. And that's why you're here talking to me today, because there was a guy in Israel who just was feeling his body and how it moved. And now you have a website and you have a business and all of these things. You become kind of the Ido Portal brand, like everyone does. Does part of you ever think, I'm just going back to the beach and I'm going to want to walk away from all this stuff and I'm just going to get back to the guy who fell in love with his body?
Actually, I am that guy. That's one of the major things limiting my development as a business, as a teacher sometimes. I'm still that guy, and everybody around me knows that. It's like I'm still that guy on the beach. Every day I'm out there. That's what I do. I still move more than my students. I still research the body deeper and enjoying my movement. And that's for sure a major reason why people are reaching out and they can't get what they want from me, because I didn't devote a lot of time to doing that because I was busy doing this. Because I realized that I need to lead from the front. In the Israeli military, this is a basic thing. We lost more high-ranked officers than any other military because we send them in front. As illogical as that be, when you're being led by someone from the front, you have full confidence in that person and you just go with everything that you have. That's the only way that I know how to do things, and I'm trying to lead from the front and not kind of develop a small belly there and talk about my movement days, and that's garbage. And the more I age, the more tricky it becomes, but I want to do it in a good way. I want to do it in an honest way. And yeah, that's funny enough, I never set out to do any branding stuff, and actually I didn't name it under any name. So my students called it after me. And that became the brand name. So I went with it because you need a brand name, you need something. But actually I never wanted to develop a brand, and I always talked against brands, and I just realized it's the least worst.
Right. Maybe that's why it works so well, because it's not engineered from the top, maybe.
Maybe.
You seem a bit like a reluctant messiah. That's the one thing I was thinking when I was preparing from you. And
oh, man.
Do you like that term? You could use that. Ido Portal, the reluctant messiah. In that so many people seem drawn to you, and now I understand why, because you're the real deal. And when you talk about these things, it's because you believe it. And the reason people come and see you in person, I think, is because you look into them and you're like, I'm going to show you something and I'm going to do it in a way where there's no trauma and that kind of thing. And then you get people saying, Ido, what do I eat? What do I do? What do I buy? It seems to me you're a bit reluctant to be that guy. Am I right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though in your mind you lead from the front, like the Israeli military told you how to do, but part of me thinks you don't want to be answering everyone's question about life.
Yeah, it's a bit tricky. Yeah, it always sounds ridiculous in an Israeli mind. This kind of thing, like giving people, the answers, or something. Again, it's like, come next to me. Let me lead. I'm definitely a leader, always was, in any environment that I was part of. But also leading with a smile, with a wink, with a, yeah, and not trying to sound too gospel. And some of the stuff that happened to me was a bit too much for me. In a way.
Like what?
The image that is so far from me. Not because we set it up wrong, because people need an image, yeah. and they affect it. The eye of the beholder, it affects who you are, how you look. And the closest people to me, we make fun of it a bit. And like my website, I look like something in between an underwear model and an acrobat, and I don't subscribe to it. I never cared about how I looked, how my body looks. Maybe not, never say never. At a certain point, I cared, but I don't even remember that point. And but people, of course, assume because you see that body there, because maybe we've used that thing. I don't want to be a messiah. I want to be respected. I want to be credited for what I developed. And that's important for me. Important for me to people realize where it comes from. if it comes from me. And if not, I will name the names like I did in this conversation. Everything that comes from somewhere else, I will credit exactly like the scientific community does. But I'm not a messiah. I'm a thinker, I'm a teacher, I'm a mover, and I take these things and I put them out there, and then it's yours to do whatever you want with. I call it the vomit. The knowledge is a little bit like vomit. You come into a room like this room, and it's all over the floor. And now there is a choice. You can come in and you can, and then in a different room you're gonna, or you can sip through the cracks and it disappears and nobody know we were here. And this, calling it the vomit, is because I don't want to be the sum of my knowledge. I treat it on a very low way, to keep myself distant from my knowledge. So it's a very complex reality. Well, you want to be credited for your ideas and your intellectual property, but at the same time, you don't want to become that thing. And you want to provide answers, but you don't want to sound like a messiah. And I'm trying to do my best to balance things out in a way that I can go to sleep with myself at night.
Good answer. I love the vomit part. I always finish off every show by asking a few questions to my guests. I'm going to hit you with them. If you could make a phone call to the 20-year-old Ido Portal and give that young man a bit of advice, what would you tell him to do or not to do?
Good question. It's kind of a Bernard Shaw kind of questions, huh? Unravel, which is don't do anything more than necessary. React. Don't plan too much. Pull the strings and then react, and then wait for the wobble in the matrix around you and react to that. And because I was delusional about planning for many years.
I guess the epitome of what you do is being in the moment, right? That is a given, I guess, when it comes to movement.
You can say it's another messiah kind of thing, but yeah, of course, embodiment, being in the movement, living that reality, and being able to react is very important. To be in the movement, or else to be in the moment, or else you can't react.
Best advice you've ever received in your life?
Best advice. When you wipe your ass, don't look. And everybody looks. It's a funny thing that we all have this tendency to look, to examine. But sometimes in life, you don't need to look, to observe, or to stop and examine it and measure yourself. It's a very thing like, what did I do here? Like, this reflection back is not always the best thing. And it was a good advice that I got many years ago, one of my teachers.
And just move on, keep going.
Yeah, move on. It's not necessary always to examine, because that puts you in the mindset of future planning, and sometimes it's not honest.
Okay. Last bit of advice to the 20-year-old that's listening to us around the world that wants to move more. I guess I asked you this before, but what advice do you give to them? What should they do?
Research. First thing is research. Start to research, and you can use my name to start that, because I laid out the groundwork for you. There is so much there. Just go and Google my name. Go on our Facebook page, Ido Portal. Go on our website, idoportal.com, and just have a look and start to unravel from there and do your research. And then just start to experiment with movement and start to open your mind. Go do some gymnastics, go do some martial arts, and don't think about efficiency when you're doing martial arts necessarily. It's not about that movement wise. It's one choice, but it's not only that. So for example, for a child, I might move away from the efficient martial arts and I might give him a lot more movement by choosing something traditional. Just move, experiment, open your mind, take a class. It's all for you. It's all for human beings. You don't need to be a dancer to take a dance class. You don't need to be a martial artist that's how you become a dancer. That's how you become a martial artist. But many people already have a title. They come in and limits them.
So move, basically.
Move.
Yeah. That's a bit of advice. Ido, thanks so much for coming. It was a lot of fun talking to you. It is interesting because, you know, you get an image of someone, because I've been to your website, I've seen your videos, and, you know, obviously the person is always different than the image. And what's fascinating about you is you probably didn't even create that image, and now it's probably not even in your control anymore because your fans and people have established that this is the Ido. It's probably the Ido they present to their friends. Look at this guy, and it might not have anything to do with you. So it's fascinating to meet you. I hope I do come and take one of your seminars one of these days.
Honored and a pleasure. Okay. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. If you're listening to us on iTunes, you can come see our great looking faces on YouTube. If you want to get in touch with Ido, you can go find him on Google, on his website. It's a great looking site, or just go to YouTube. He's got some fabulous interviews and fabulous videos and things like that. As we say on London Real, it's about the journey. I wish you well in yours, Ido. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
What we call reality is in fact nothing more than a culturally sanctioned and linguistically reinforced hallucination.
This week on London Real, mobility expert and CrossFitter Kelly Starrett.
You should be thinking about how you think. You should be thinking about how you sleep and how you eat and how you move. What we've found always is that if you give people the right information, they make better decisions, which is the heart and soul of what this show is.
Imagine you have the most extraordinary set of software, the brain, on top of the most extraordinary set of hardware.
Everyone that I'm around that I really respect, they bust their ass really hard. Like, if you think you're gonna be good at it, go do it.
Say, aha, that's an aha moment. There's a chance for us to get better and address the things we're weak at.
Let your goal be to lead a simple life. And I was like, fuck that. Like, that's some bullshit. I don't want a simple life. Bring on the... And now I understand exactly what he meant.
On Sunday, London Real presents Kelly Starrett, Supple Leopard.
You have no idea what you're capable of. And we're living in a time where it's all possible.